Good evening. Welcome to this special Saturday edition of the Pandemic Podcast. Me, Astin-Gregory. Following tonight's briefing from the Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, I'm here to share the news, asking the question, what's the news? I don't know if you could hear me offline there. I was just warming up for this episode by kind of somewhat mocking the latest variant name, Omicron. In fact, I was practicing saying Omicron, which I can clearly struggle with. It sounds like a Transformers character. But following the recent discovery of the Omicron variant in South Africa, the world very quickly descended into hysteria. Despite very clearly very little information being available at this stage, it's come as no surprise. This is the global response to variants seem to occur at very specific times of year. There's almost a calendar. If you recall, this time last year, the Delta variant was kind of announced, despite being first identified in September. Now, there was I made a statement last night. I sent out a post. There was a World Economic Forum article that was from July, which said that the variant had been discovered. It turned out that the actual page had been updated multiple times since first publishing. You can go on the Wayback Machine to see that, in fact, the World Economic Forum hadn't announced the variant back in July, in the interest of full information. But as such, the world went into hysteria following this news. I was reading an article in the New Scientist this morning, which essentially confirmed, which I shared on Twitter, that the scientific community know very little about this variant at this point, other than that it's potentially, as always, more transmissible. Every variant so far has potentially been more transmissible, by the way. And when it comes to actually understanding the potential risks of a variant, which we should take seriously, we should probably be looking at whether it poses a greater threat to our health or even mortality. But once again, it's the threat of transmissibility, the risk of more cases. We saw recently that there was an adaptation of one of the variants, which led to a symptomless variant. I don't know in the history of time where an illness that has no symptoms and no bearing on your body that we'd be afraid of. Now, of course, there are symptomless diseases that are dangerous. But it's just, I think people are tired of this kind of boy cried wolf situation around variants. And if you notice, Omicron itself, we haven't really heard much about any. Bear in mind that the World Health Organization created these naming conventions around the variants to avoid kind of stigmatism of being called the Indian variant, for instance, or the Kent variant. So they use this new labeling system where we went alpha, beta, etc. The Delta's the kind of dominant variant around the world right now. But we haven't really heard anything about any other variant. If you think we're going through the alphabet, we've now got to O, Omicron in this case. We haven't heard much about any of the other, maybe a little bit about Gamma, Lambda. There was a couple of others that have kind of barely scratched the surface. But with each of these, you have to remember, every time they are announced, there's always this threat of increased transmissibility. Now, the reality of this one, the reason why there's more of a attention on this one is because of the specific mutations to the spike protein. And of course, the vaccines are programmed to target the spike protein. So if there's sizable changes to the spike protein, then it could render them completely ineffective, which is why there's a level of concern. So Boris has opened up. I've got tons of notes here. I've only got a little bit of time. Boris opened up essentially by commending Britain for its fastest rollout of the vaccine in Europe, the fastest booster rollout. Went on to say that whilst cases are somewhat high, falling hospitalizations and falling deaths are a positive move, which absolutely is at this time of year going into winter. Talked about that the variant has been discovered in South Africa, and again, the language is always very specific. Appears to be rapidly transmissible, but the reality is there's less than 100 cases confirmed, I believe, around the world now, which makes it very difficult to actually assess any meaningful information around its severity or transmissibility. But of course, it's being monitored now. The language is just wonderful to watch. I mean, it's just a masterclass in behavioral science, given If I was, I've worked with businesses, all kinds of businesses, and we've worked on growth plans and marketing strategies and how to create compelling sales propositions. And the language and the kind of the way you build up the story is so important. So with that in mind, at the front end, they said that there's evidence that this new variant can spread amongst those double vaccinated, very specifically underscore double vaccinated, in the context of of what we'll go on to talk about in a moment, and noted that the mutation could mean reduced effectiveness of vaccines against this particular variant, which again, for those who have been vaccinated and thought that was their bit done to protect them, of course, that will be of concern. I was worried when they started to pre-frame some of the things that they were planning to do because he said three things. We need time for scientific analysis, which is I concur. Two, to dose, to deploy more vaccine doses, and three, for the NHS to prepare. And when he said the NHS, we need time for the NHS to prepare, I thought, my goodness, here we go. We're going to go for a short, sharp lockdown. But fortunately, that's not the case. But travel is going to be affected, particularly with inbound travel. Fortunately, travel has not been suspended, so they haven't shut the borders. But all travellers now entering the UK will be forced to take a PCR test, and they'll be forced to self-isolate until they've had a negative test result. So all travellers entering the UK, whether visiting or returning, will now be forced to self-isolate until they have a negative test, meaning if you're unfortunate enough to have a positive test because you've been exposed to the virus somewhere else in the last 90 days or longer potentially, and you come across as positive, then you could be waiting around a little while. So I'm sure common sense will prevail or not. And as a result, all contacts that have come into suspected contact with Omicron will also be asked to self-isolate. At this stage, it's not clear. It wasn't specifically clear with the testing regimen whether they're specifically looking for positive Omicron tests. That would make sense for genomic sequencing. But further to come, we'll cover this on Monday when we've got the full details. Where they have made a change is the use of masks. So Boris was very loose around his description of the changes when it came to masks. He said there'll be an increased use of masks. But what has materialized is that masks will once again become compulsory on public transport and in retail, but interestingly not within hospitality. So you can go and get your knees up, have a good drinking session, have a party, and probably more in a situation where you'd be much more in close proximity with others versus shopping. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I go shopping, I probably don't get near anyone anyway. But this is not about risk reduction. It's a political move, of course. They have to be shown to do something. Masks are a placebo for people's anxieties. So I think that's a political move just to show that the government is willing to do something, because otherwise they'll be accused of doing nothing, which I'll come on to in a moment. So re-emphasized that they don't know the effectiveness of the vaccines against the new variant until further analysis, and went on to reinforce the need for boosters as a protection strategy, which leads on to the next point, that the deal with vaccines is now being deferred to the JCVI. So there's been 3 requests to the JCVI, and this is of particular note. The actual restrictions that have come in around the travel and the masks, they've said it's temporary for 3 weeks with a 3-week review point, within which point, realistically, we should now get a better understanding of the data around the new variant. But here's where things get a bit more tricky. The details have been referred to the JCVI, and there's been 3 requests. Number 1, regarding the boosters, they have requested that they extend the booster rollout to younger age groups from age 18 and above. If you remember, boosters in the UK were for the most vulnerable groups and the older age groups. They've requested that the boosters are now rolled out to the age 18 and above. And of course, this will be used as a platform for really aggressively driving that forward. They're also asking for second dose approval for 12 to 15-year-olds. So initially it was approved a single dose, but that's now gone for second dose approval for 12 to 15-year-olds. And what's even more concerning is level 3, although very little was said about this, considerations for whether the vaccine should be approved for younger age groups under 12s. Now, if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the world, the likes of US, Canada, they're already vaccinating 5 to 12-year-olds. Pfizer themselves are already talking about 6 months and above. And whilst Chris Whitty, during the broadcast, said he's more reassured about the safety, I think the public are less reassured, given that, according to some sources, that athletes are now collapsing with heart conditions at a rate of 1 every 4 days, which, people can see for themselves. Really sad for these athletes. But as you reach these kind of millions of vaccines deployed, more and more people obviously speak to their friends about their experience, and understandably, people have had concerns when you see the millions of adverse reactions that have occurred in proximity of the vaccine rollout. So the key piece of news, really, other than the mask mandates, compulsory masks, is the concerning reference to the JCVI. Now, obviously, no decisions have been made, but we know that the JCVI are effectively a political unit. They are supposed to be independent, but they're a political department, and will most likely go with the tide. Here, the world has gone into panic mode despite very little information around this new variant. So you can probably expect those 3 things to be approved. Certainly, almost guaranteed that the boosters will be rolled out to the 18s and above, and you can be quite likely to see a second dose approved for 12 to 15-year-olds. Then it was deferred to Whitty and Valence. The cases, he talked again about the reduction in hospitalizations and deaths, which is very positive news. Talked about the kind of progress of the Omicron variant discovered in South Africa, cases in Hong Kong, Belgium, Germany, now the UK. Expects cases to emerge elsewhere, but the big question is, will it outcompete Delta? Again, with all these other variants that have come forward since Delta, none of them have have the ability to outcompete Delta yet. So we've seen similar emergences of different variants, but they have not, even when they've shown rapid transmissibility, they've not outcompeted Delta yet. So whether this one will or not is not clear. They did say that within one region in South Africa, every sequenced test was the new variant, but that's a very small sample size. Plus, when you're specifically looking for something, it's going to potentially create bias in the data. So time will tell. But in my view, this is scaremongering again. Scariants are here. It's too early to tell anything. I can't believe the way. Well, I can believe it because this is how things operate now. There's always some political milestone that results in the dramatization or alarmism around a variant. It's just become predictable. I'm surprised I didn't call it earlier than now, because I've been on point previously. I've obviously been lost track of time, baby brain. But you could have almost called it. There's 16 million people in the UK, nearly 17 million have had the third dose of the over 12 third dose of the vaccine, which is obviously a fraction of the 50 million plus people who've had the first and the 46 million of the second dose. So clearly they need a lever to move that along. So I should have predicted that this would have happened because, it's that time of year. They're asking whether Christmas would be affected. The media are asking whether Christmas would be affected. Boris was upbeat. Prime Minister was upbeat about Christmas, but time will tell. Because in the event of this, the hype is up now. The hype is straight up. The media. Now I'll talk to you about the media response in a minute, because the media response was classic. Ian Watson, the BBC, going on to, is this the beginning of new restrictions? Could lockdowns emerge? Will this impact our Christmas plans? You're talking about go early and go hard. Should we have pushed for plan B? This is the BBC, right? Just going straight in for the usual jugular of we should be locking down, pushing for restrictions. ITV was similar. Boris, fair enough to him, said that this is a proportionate approach given the unknowns. I think actually the UK, given the hysteria that's emerged around the world, this is a reasonable response in terms of its gravity. It's still, I say that with bated breath, because really the reality is we've got this new technology, sequencing technology, that enables, really advanced level genomic sequencing, which for medical science is a benefit. But when it comes to when you blend that with politics and media, you just get this situation. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the governments probably wouldn't even realize there's a new variant and would have cracked on with life as normal. Because if you look at the core metrics, right, falling hospitalizations, falling deaths, these are really positives. And of course, we want to keep that trajectory. So, it does make some sense to be vigilant, but you always feel like it's boy cried wolf. And that every time there's a new variant, it's just like this propaganda that comes out in time for a particular political milestone. So as expected, it became a sales pitch for the boosters. It's been deferred to the JCVI for further approval of vaccines, as I've mentioned. One of the press was asking about modelling. It just shows how they're not intelligent. The press asking these questions. You wouldn't be modelling with such low volumes of data. You'd just be completely speculating. But they know that the modelling that has done previously will ramp up fear. And it wouldn't be expected to see some more of that type of thing emerging as there's more data. But this is what the media are asking for: more restrictions, more fear-based modelling. It's quite preposterous. So in terms of a quick summary of what happened tonight in the press announcement, number one, travel restrictions for people returning to the UK, requiring self-isolation and a 10 days until a negative test, or positive test rather, positive or negative test. Secondly, the return of compulsory masks. So get your, for those of you who aren't confident in not complying, then get your exemption out. And this deference to the JCVI for potential approval of further vaccines and the inevitable sales pitch around that. So other than that, the good news is, there hasn't been any further mention of vaccine passports or Plan B. In fact, Boris was pretty positive around avoiding those things, but it's early stage. We know there's a clear formula amongst the UK government: deny, deliberate, deploy, and watch this space. But so far, we just need to keep an eye on the media here. They are the proponents of all of this. They just like to ram this down our throats. I think people just want to get on with their lives. The science generally has shown that viruses will mutate over time. They may become more transmissible, but usually less deadly. They'll eventually become endemic. Ultimately, vaccinated or unvaccinated, the path out of this is getting infected at some point, and therefore generating lasting herd immunity. So it's confusing to see the scientific community continually kind of reacting on a knee-jerk basis to every mutation. Mutations should be expected. But this is predicated on the fact that they've got a one horse. They've placed all their bets on one horse to get out of this, which, in my view, as you all know, is a flawed approach. So, in short, no major cause for concern specifically yet, but some worrying moves on the vaccination front, particularly of recent news around safety events, particularly if these are going to be rolled out to even younger groups. So watch this space. We'll keep a firm eye, and I'll bring you further information on Monday once we've had a chance to digest the government documentation and the data. I wish you well. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Subscribe to our podcast. Every time we mention the V word, I do worry about our content getting censored or taken offline. It will just take a minute of your time to go to danjgregory.com/pandemic. Join our mailing list. It'll take 1 minute of your time. We only send out 1 or 2 emails a week at the most at present. So it's just a great way for us to keep you updated with our forthcoming interviews and changes. And we are in the process of launching a new organization, Elevate Media, which will hopefully help us catalyze a global movement to raise the vibration around the world and actually shift the trajectory that we're on right now and start to bring a lot more positivity and empowerment and start thinking about how we can actually create lasting change across the systems and structures of the world. So you're going to want to keep in touch about what's happening there. All right. Peace and love. Have a wonderful